Sorry I'm not there with you, but I hope this will be a useful introduction to open context and the potential role of linked data in archaeological data curation. Data don't work like magic crystal balls. To get meaning and value from data, we need intellectual investment. Linked data helps make that investment more apparent and more collaborative across different systems, institutions, and projects. Open Context is an open source application and publishing service that emphasizes linked data. We're not ourselves a preservation repository, but we archive data with the California Digital Library, which is the University of California's main digital repository. We also mirror with the German Archaeological Institute, which is nice to keep a copy outside the United States. Our data curation practices, including linked data, have earned us recognition inside and outside of archaeology. And researchers have widely varying data needs and different kinds of dissemination and publishing needs. And this slide helps illustrate how different types of publication projects that we've already done. We've so far about 110. The kinds of publications that so far have had the most impact center on using open context as a platform for data integration, that is, studies that require large-scale aggregation of multiple data sets. And those integrated data are the most widely used and cited data that we've published so far. We use a publishing metaphor to highlight how data need to be seen as much more than a residue of other kinds of contributions. Again, data need intellectual effort, just like any other sort of publication, and so publishing metaphor helps communicate that kind of fact. Helping illustrate that, and look at issues of data cleanup. Raw data, it's by itself can be very unappetizing, difficult to use. And we provide editorial and cleanup services, and we can do that efficiently and effectively using tools like OpenRefine. We specialize in that sort of thing. We're also trying to address the issues of complexity. And this is an entity relation diagram describing complex relational databases, a complex relational database of one project from an Anglo-Saxon cemetery. But there may be many dozens or even hundreds of potentially related data sets that have similar levels of complexity. But because they're all different, that kind of complexity makes them really hard to use and understand, especially at any sort of scale. So without dealing with this effort, we're leaving a kind of a debt for future generations, and that debt is in the form of complexity. Our publishing workflow tries to mitigate that complexity and that complexity debt. And there's not enough time really to discuss every aspect of this yet, but linked data annotation is a key way in which we make diverse data more broadly understandable and useful. This slide shows some of the different vocabularies and ontologies that we use, and we provide editorial supports to relate different idiosyncratic data with these common vocabularies and ontologies. To show a little example, this is an attribute describing animal bones, and we're relating that attribute with a bioinformatics ontology called Uberon. And not only does it make it easier to compare, at least in this respect, different zooarchaeological data sets together, but we're able to benefit from the intellectual contributions of the bioinformatics community, and that helps build ties between archaeology and other disciplinary communities. And this really does matter for reuse. Few data sets that are archived, even with institutional archiving and metadata, actually see that much reuse. But by using linked data and shared ontologies and bringing together different data sets at interesting levels of scale, we're able to promote that sort of reuse that we're all looking for. And here's an example published in the journal PLOS One of looking at several, this is about 15 different data sets from several different researchers, 35 different researchers working in Anatolia, looking at the Neolithic, and they published in PLOS One. But what's interesting about this is that their data were used by at least 3 subsequent publications, and these data are also used in teaching, and that teaching is an important kind of an outcome also. Moving forward, here's a test example that I developed of an executable paper that combines text, explanatory text, open data, and code for zooarchaeological data analysis. Linked data together with machine-readable APIs then can work in this world of more reproducible research. In this case, this figure here that's shown can be linked directly to the source data, live data, and you can inspect the source code that goes behind the generation of that visualization. Linked data together with machine-readable APIs can also have impacts beyond the research community itself. And here's a map of current coverage of the Digital Index of North American Archaeology. We call this the DINA project. And what this does is this project is aggregating state government-created inventories of over 500,000 different archaeological sites. The project PIs, David G. Anderson and Josh Wells, recently led publication of an analysis of the DINA data in PLOS ONE. And this analysis shows some tens of thousands of archaeological sites threatened with climate change-driven coastal flooding. The paper itself got over 20,000 views and a huge amount of uptake in the popular press, including sources like Newsweek, USA Today, Washington Post, and cultural heritage institutions like ICOMOS and UNESCO. And the data are even being worked with by data journalists in the press to develop their own visualizations and to help communicate this to their viewers. And since the data are freely available in open formats with open standards, and here's an example of how we make it available using the standard GeoJSON, they can be used by other researchers to support independent work. And here, Jolene Smith with the Virginia State Government is combining DINA data from our API with storm surge risk data, and she's using that to help communicate planning needs for other policymakers in the state of Virginia. This emphasis on linked open data also enables other platforms to develop more specialized interfaces and services. And here's an example of the Pelagios project, which in Pelagios is building interfaces and services around relating all sorts of different kinds of content with geographic places. And Pelagios is using a subset of the DINA data to highlight links between publications, reports, government websites, and the archaeological sites that we're curating. And what's neat about this is that Pelagios does a much better job of showing these relationships than the Open Context website itself. So by making these data and using these approaches of linked data, by making them available, the information that we're curating can enter into a much wider community where lots more talent can be brought to bear in actually making use of this data than the talent that we have only available to us in-house. Now, all of this takes some time and some faith. Linked data is like a telephone network, and if you're the first person with a telephone, that telephone's really only useful as a paperweight. But as more people join the network, the value of that network will grow. And we need to bootstrap that growth in archaeology to really understand the full potential of linked data. It is hard and it will take lots of time. There are many, many, many niche topics in archaeology. In fact, archaeology is basically all niche topics. And it will really take a lot of time to develop the vocabularies and to network enough relevant data together to actually realize a lot of this value. So again, this is an act of faith. But linking is not just a matter of good technical practice, it's also a matter of good ethical practice. It really shows that you're part of a much larger knowledge community and that you care to look beyond your own pet project, your own pet data sets. Linked data helps build context and it helps build community. And those are two critical aspects that I think we need to really recognize as needed for long-term sustainability. So, anyway, thank you so much. Sorry I'm not there, but thank you to Teresa and Kelsey for bringing us all together, at least in a virtual sense.